Hey, it's Chase from On the Table Gaming, and today I'm joined by none other than the Lord Commander Bob from Sunday Slaughter and Brett Lanpher. Thanks so much for both of you for coming on.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here as always, and with my good friend Bob, it's even better. Yeah, it's been a long time, right? I think it's been last time I was on, it was with Max, and we were talking about community building and stuff for the game. That was a fun one.
I feel that was pre-COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
I can't believe I've still like I keep saying it, but I've still lost all sense of time. But here we are again. We're fresh after another update, and I feel like it's kind of like rings on a tree. We can go back and talk about, like, oh, I remember when this first update. But before we jump into that, how you been? What have you been playing? Have you been trying out the new update?
Yeah, I actually took a extended break for a little while after Gen Con last year, and I've played probably more in the past week and a half since it was released than I have in probably the last 3 months. So got some Night's Watch and Free Folk games in.
Oh, excellent. I want to pick your brain about that. How about you, Brett?
Actually, I didn't take a break, but I felt really invigorated by the changes. I've played some Night's Watch, some Lannister, some Stark, some Targaryen, and I plan to give Greyjoys a shake. I want to give Baratheons a shake. It's honestly, I'm really excited about it, and I want to give every faction a little bit of a try. I think it's a really cool landscape right now, so I've been enjoying it a lot.
So, coming out of any update, can be a lot of different emotions, right, that get tied up to it. This is a game that we've all invested a lot of time into, whether it's playing itself physically, painting the miniatures, interacting with the communities in different ways. And so it's always setting up this sort of precipice for this discomfort with change, right? A lot of things, maybe lists you play have been switched up. What's been your kind of general overview of the 2023 season update? Has it kind of surprised you in some ways? Have there been things that you are a little bit disappointed about or still adapting to? Kind of where are you landing at this?
To be honest, as soon as I saw this patch, I think it was kind of dubbed by the community as the abilities patch, quote unquote. And, it was kind of a shock at first. You saw a lot of very core abilities being changed. I don't want to use the term auto-include, but they were staples of a lot of builds. So many things were built around these abilities. It was there was a shock factor at first. So after you take a second to process that, I can see where this is actually a great idea, because I think, and I could be wrong, this is just, my opinion, but I think the best way to really get a look at where factions stand is to take away some of these universal abilities. They didn't, I don't feel like they picked on any one faction in particular. They kind of looked at these universal abilities that were just used over and over again. And once you take those away and you let that faction explore more into their own personal identity, more of their unique units, unique abilities, then you get a very good idea of where factions stand. And I think for me, that's been the most exciting part, is when I list build, I don't feel, from the competitive end, it's not like, well, I'm playing Starks, I better have Hardened, I have to have She-Bears, where am I putting the Mormont vet? Things like that. They kind of left my mind. And then I just opened up and looked at the faction as a whole. And I said, okay, well, here's these tools that I have. I no longer feel obligated to run this. So now what kind of stuff can I run now that maybe I wanted to run before, but it was pushed out by some of these other things? And in reality, for me, my Stark, who's my very fun go-to faction, I do think they're competitive, but they're also fun for me. It's just even more fun for me now, because I don't feel badly about leaving some of those things behind. And they're still usable, but I just don't feel like they're an auto-include anymore.
And I want to circle back to you, Brett, about the Starks, because I have some friends that they kind of played a very standard sort of, maybe we consider like auto-include lists of stuff, and the changes have them kind of scratching their heads, and they realize they have to go back to list building and looking at things. So I'd love to pick your brain on maybe some of the stuff you're seeing right now. But Bob, how about you? So you've got some games in with Free Folk and Night's Watch. Was there a noticeable difference in the games that you were playing? What were you seeing there that maybe intrigued you, or were there things that were kind of falling flat for you?
I think overall the patch is awesome. It's small changes here and there, and like Brett said, across the board. So that helps balance in general. things that were getting played all the time. Like Night's Watch relied on Relentless so much last patch. And that was, I mean, it's definitely, it's still there, but it's completely different. It's not that extra activation anymore. I've been exclusively trying to run 7 activation Night's Watch in the past week or so. Struggling at first, and things were starting to click a little bit more. I think a lot of it was me being rusty from not playing as much. Playing as Free Folk I ran Mance. We actually did a live stream the one time, and I ran Mance just to see how it was going to be without the bubble. He's still good, but he doesn't feel like, I didn't feel like I was in 100% control of the game the entire time like I did in the past with Mance, unless I was playing another Free Folk player. But yeah, it's still good. The change to There's Too Many definitely came into play, where I would have killed a unit if I had that extra damage, and I didn't kill the unit, and I still ran the Chariot because I was really trying to run the things that got changed for Free Folk, that got like toned down, to see if you could still compete with them. And you can still compete with them for sure. They're still competitive, and they're still fun to play, and it's just it's a different type of faction, and you just gotta approach it a little bit differently. But overall, the changes I think are great, and it brings Free Folk Mance down to reality, I guess, a little bit. And hopefully we'll see that in some upcoming tournaments. I know there's some big ones coming up, and I can't wait to see some of the lists that people create with the new patch.
Did you happen to notice, notice a change at all in like the tempo of the game when you were playing Free Folk, with changes like Endless Horde? Did that make an appearance in the game, and did it seem to have an impact? That seems like a pretty dramatic shift.
Yeah, Endless Horde's still really strong in my opinion. The first game I played with Free Folk, it didn't come into play really at all. I guess the unit that I had it on, or I didn't draw it till later or something like that, it didn't really do too much. The second game I played, Endless Horde felt really strong. Still not as strong as it was in my opinion, but because you can't just bring on another free activation and play with extra points in the game. But it felt like I could put it on a Raider unit and just use them as a tar pit, and if they die, they just respawn. And that helps, especially against aggressive factions and aggressive players who will come across the map to try to just roll over you, and you just throw a Raider at them with Endless Horde on them, and they're across the map. So then your Endless Horde Raider respawns, and you charge them again, and then you tie them down even more. So it all depends on the situation. Now I've noticed also with Endless Horde, you can play it right away. So with Mance, you have your long plan. You go get Endless Horde because it thins your deck out, and you can then see your other cards as well, because you can play it immediately. So it's still really good. It does change things a lot though, because it doesn't give you those extra activations. Sometimes at least one, but sometimes even 2 as you're playing, and which can be devastating to your opponents.
And what people can maybe sometimes lament, like some of these changes to cards that you've kind of grown to love. Do you feel like that's a good change for like the overall health of the game?
Oh, heck yes.
Yeah.
I think it's not like, I remember Fabio was talking to a group of us at Gen Con. There was like 5 or 6 of us, and he goes, "Oh, I think I've solved Endless Horde." And what he told us there, like, it wasn't like a secret or anything. He just flat out told people. He didn't say it was official or anything like that. And he just flat out told us what it was. And guess what? That's what it was when it was released. I'm like, wow, okay. We liked the idea then. So everyone was like, oh, wow, that would be really good. That would be a good change and more in line with other factions with their quest cards. And I guess he liked the feedback, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that CMON needs to fly Fabio up to more U.S. events here so you can get inspiration and for future patches.
Yeah,
say from CMON is listening.
It was fun meeting Fabio at Gen Con last year, that's for sure, and hanging out a little bit.
And so, Brett, what are you seeing as any things that have been impacting your games in particular to some of the factions you love? You know, and I know you play a lot of things. Has it like rekindled any love for some of your original factions like Lannisters? You know, how have you seen the update impacting them?
Absolutely. The Lannisters were a faction that actually kind of got some some love to some of their underplayed units. And I know you and I have talked in the past about this concept of the kind of like the Lannister militia. You're thinking like Lannister guardsmen and halberdiers, crossbows, and knights. Like they're kind of like your basic core fantasy style troops, right? They're just kind of basic core troops for every game. And now I think that type of build most certainly can become a reality at this point. The change to halberdiers felt like a really good change. It felt like it was something that maybe should have happened a while ago, and it feels like they've tinkered with the halberdiers through several patches trying to find the sweet spot, and I think they finally found that sweet spot where the halberdiers are a good functioning unit that competes with Lannister guardsmen, and that point drop opens up your list building to the point where you can really squeeze a good strong battle line with 5 or 6 combat units that are kind of like this militia style, this Lannister wall, if you will. And for me, that's very exciting. So when I've been playing around with Lannister and I've been playing into the halberdiers, and they're certainly not like an overpowered unit. They're just, I feel like they're finally where they should be. They're seeing the table. They synergize really well with some of the commanders. It's really super fun. I'm just enjoying the Lannister infantry right now, and that was kind of a liability for Lannisters prior to this, and it feels like it's a strength now. And then in terms of Starks, again, I feel like their primary identity has always been the direwolves. I feel like the direwolves got stronger this patch by not changing, which seems like a weird thing to say, but I say things like predators and an ecosystem. When you think about how it works in real life, it applies here in the game as well. If you've got things like the relentless Sworn Brothers that could make double activations in a round, they would just murder direwolves. But now you've got the Sworn Brothers don't have the ability to push out the Night's Watch activation. So taking the direwolves, they can get into the softer targets as they're intended to do. And for me, they just work so much better in this new landscape because they didn't change. And you can still do the same things with Starks that you could before by running, 3 or 4 combat units with 2 or 3 direwolves and playing the map and kind of dictating the movement and dictating the flow of combat. And so Starks, for me, they've always been fun, but the lists that I was running before, actually, for me, they really just got better. So that's always exciting as well. And it's just a really fun time to experiment with things. And I think you'll find that some of the stuff that you couldn't run because of the kind of quote unquote gatekeepers that were in the meta with the Relentless, the Warcry, the Hardened, the Expert Duelist being on a 3+. If you open up your imagination back to the things that you wanted to try, I think you'll put them on the table and you'll find out that they're certainly working much better than they were before.
Have any of you had a chance to really tinker at all with Greyjoys? Because that's something I certainly have not thought a lot about, but that's something where I've seen a few people in the community saying, oh no, sky's falling, like we're in a much worse spot now. And, I didn't know if any of you had any insight or reassurance or any thoughts on that.
I know Chris from Sunday Slaughters, a Greyjoy player, is a little disappointed with it. I guess the Reapers got buffed a little bit, but it always feels weird when other things in the game change and people get buffs, and then your faction's sitting there and you didn't really get much from it. So like the Warcry, and then Relentless and Victorian stayed at 3 points. A lot of people were pretty disappointed about that. And then, the same goes for Baratheon players too. The Baratheon players got 2 nerfs and nothing else. So it was kind of, Hardened also. I still don't think Hardened affect Baratheons as much because they're putting their Hardened in a 3 armor unit. So it's still really good when it blocks 2 at last rank. But it's kind of a feel bad when your faction doesn't get anything and when you're seeing the other ones get stuff, so that I just think a lot of the changes that were made though leave an opportunity that you don't have to redesign certain things like Mance. You don't have to worry about that when you're trying to buff other stuff now. It just creates a little bit more leeway for the next patch, which who knows when that will be, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's nice to go back to these smaller style patches, right? I think that you're still kind of reeling from the 2021 update that changed so many things, and it seems like this is actually moving in the direction of like that's all settling a little bit. Obviously, I still think there are things that can still be tweaked, but it's maybe a good sign where we can just start. Okay, we have like smaller pulls in the levers here. Now, have either of you played other war games? And when patches come out, like in your past experience with games, like how have you traditionally like kind of dealt with that? Like, what's your kind of mentality when you look at a patch update? Is it stuff that angers you, depresses you? Does it make you want to sell your faction? Have you taken breaks from games and gone to other games and come back? Like, what's been your experience with just updates in general?
I can't speak to this. Song's really the only game I've played, other than video games, which can do it way easier than tabletop games. Like I play Dota 2, and it's constantly shifting meta in Dota 2. So, and I like it because it keeps the game fresh. But like you mentioned, people don't get a buff and they just get 2 nerfs. It makes them, hey, I was on the verge of not wanting to play anyways. Now I just got 2 nerfs. Now I'm definitely not playing. But then there's the other people are like, that look at the wide view of the whole thing, and they're like, okay, everything else got nerfed that was causing me problems, and now I should have a little bit easier of a time. That's the most I can speak to it, though.
Well, you kind of mentioned video games there. So, CMON's basically like on a yearly patch schedule here. What do you think would be like the ideal patch update for you personally for a game like this?
I'll reference Dota 2 again. They do every 6 months.
Every 6 months?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And just
You
small
think,
ones. Doesn't have to be big ones. It doesn't have to be a big patch. Just something to make different units rotate into play and other units rotate out of play. In an ideal world, you'd want everything to be able to play and competitive, but that's not it. That's nearly impossible. So one thing's always going to be better. If you have 2 units that serve the same role, one's going to be better in a different way than the other one. So, every 6 months would be pretty awesome. It would keep people interested. And I know at one point a long time ago, they were aiming for that, and then COVID hit, and everything in the world changed at that point. So
every 6 months, well, that would be kind of interesting. Even if they did like this size patch, but like halved it, even if we only got like half these changes, like small tweaks, that might be interesting.
I think people,
like,
people have really, I think all of that cause and effect showed that people were willing to, a lot of people complain about it, but people are willing to print their cards.
It's also funny, like where you go, depending on communities, like if you go on like Board Game Geek or things like that, it has a very different, like, why is the game changing so much vibe versus other communities. And it's like, if you're coming to the game from board games versus maybe other traditional war games, or even like video games, like the expectations, how much those can change and align. Brett, I know you've played, you've a little bit of Warhammer Fantasy too, right, in the past? What's been your relationship with big updates? And, is there a certain mentality you come into these with?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Warhammer Fantasy it's a bigger scale game, right? So if something happens to a unit that you love, instead of it being like, a tray of 12 guys that's, nicely packaged and perfectly set for table play, it might be your unit of 50. It might be your 2 units of 50. So those changes definitely hit a lot harder in Warhammer. And you took it a little bit more personally. And I use a generic you as like the community. Even in Warhammer, it was the same for me. I personally would get a little bit tired of playing the same things over and over. You're always chasing after your ultimate list, right? And that's the case in any war game. You're trying to build the best combinations, the best synergies that you can, and then you play it, you think you perfect it, you tweak it. And then I just feel like once you've gotten to the point where you're like, this is the list, then you go and you play it, you compete with it, it just gets a little bit stale. So for me, it was always welcome, and as a Warriors of Chaos player, I don't know if there's any of you others out there, but in 7th edition, it was all about Marauders. I think I'm not the only person that went from 7th to 8th edition with 100 Marauders, and it's like, well, what am I doing with these Marauders now? And
Mhm.
and initially it's like, man, this really sucks. Like the core of this army is gone. But for me, I took it to heart a little bit. I was upset for a little while, maybe a few days, but then I just opened my mind and it was like, well, this is Warriors of Chaos, right? And then now, since my core is not filled with Chaos Marauders, I have a reason to take the Chaos Warriors, the actual meant to be the core of the army. And in the end, I ended up just running, a couple units of 25 or 30 Chaos Warriors, whatever the case was. And I was happy in the end because it was something different. It was something new to paint. It was a new kind of synergy and a new kind of list style that worked. And I think it's fair, right? It's fair to be upset. It's fair to feel sad. You've invested hobby time, you've painted, whatever the case may be, and then maybe this unit isn't what you expected it to be in the patch. It's not functioning the same as it did before, but you can take it as an opportunity, as I've said, to try some of those other things out. It's always a terrible thing when you've invested your time, but maybe even if they don't fit your style going into a new patch, the positive thing about CMON and the way that they've done A Song of Ice and Fire, this is a joke we've made on the podcast before. If something goes on the shelf, the quote unquote on the shelf, it gets an adjustment. It's just not something that you want to run anymore. You never sell it, right? Because if something gets shelved for so long, it's pretty much a guarantee that CMON is going to come back, circle around, and give it a look, and then it's going to be good again. The joke is
That also applied to buying the units too. Like, remember when supply was so short?
absolutely,
Even if the unit wasn't very great and you didn't think you'd play it, you still bought it. 'Cause
absolutely.
you weren't sure if you were going to get it again. And this reminds me. This is some nostalgia here. Remember when Sworn Brothers were 5 points and went to 7?
They were 6 and went to 7.
Oh, that's what I meant. 6 points and went to 7, and everyone's like, now I can't run my 5 Sworn Brothers. I just bought 2 starter sets and an extra unit, and now I can't run them all.
And it didn't age well, and it's kind of like it could be a case here, and my intent is never to sit and tell the community like you're wrong and here's the past. Like you're entitled to feel the way that you feel. I would just suggest that if you can't get your old list to work, I would just challenge, have you tried it? Or is this a mental roadblock? Is this this unit got nerfed, it's unplayable? Is that necessarily true? And then if it is true, I would encourage you to try other things and just keep in mind that surely that unit will get a look later, or you'll have another like meta shift that brings them into relevance. Something like Hardened, when the meta lost so much offense, is why Hardened emerged as such a powerful ability. That wasn't because Hardened necessarily just got buffed to the moon. It was a buff by other changes. And those are the types of things that we've seen with this patch. And I think some of those changes are coming to be reality. They're not just a theory. They're things that are actually happening. Like this thing changed. Therefore, even though this component or this fact or this unit or this attachment didn't change at all, they got better because of universal changes across the game. And it circles back to this ecosystem. If the things that were keeping you from, if Khal Drogo's 3+ expert duelist was keeping you from running Sir Robert Strong, now that Khal Drogo expert duelist is only on a 5+, and it's less likely to be the penultimate counter to Robert Strong, now maybe you put Robert Strong on the table, and you benefited not because Robert Strong got changed, you benefited because something else in the environment got changed. And I think that's kind of the core to this entire patch, is the changes that they picked were deliberate, and they, in my opinion, they were brilliant, smart changes that they themselves just changing will shift the entire ecosystem. The entire game is different. Even though so many things didn't change, they're different. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think for me, I'm always thinking about, I've had really tumultuous relationship with changes. And I'm this smaller updates like this, like I'm totally fine with. Man, back trying to play War Machine and Hordes, that was a game which I like was on the sort of periphery of, but trying to keep up with. And there would be these changes where like suddenly like whole themes would like suddenly not be worth it. And I'd be like, literally put in a bid and like not get to use again. it was such a wild roller coaster. And X-Wing, when it went to the big 2.0, I ended up sort of dropping off from that game. So I feel like there's always a little bit of trepidation when it comes into updates. I think the 2021 was maybe the biggest one that I was like nervous about for A Song of Ice and Fire. A lot of times it's kind of like a wait and see. There's some things also that got changed, like Expert Duelist. I know it wasn't necessarily like game breaking or anything like that, but it just like always felt not great. And I even before before the previous version, I remember what was it, Nationals before 1.4. I just remember bringing like a rattle shirt list and having him be like sniped right off the bat and being like, oh. Then that's one of those ones here where now that's going to +1 wound or on a 5+, a little bit of a gamble. That's one of those changes where like, yeah, well, I'll take that. That's a nice little change, even if it wasn't like game breaking. I'm kind of happy to see it like change a little bit. Are there any things that changed in this update that you are like, yes, thankfully, finally? Like, how about Relentless? I mean, that's such a controversial one. I have some people that are saying they're really enjoying it now. What do you, is that one that stood out to you at all?
I've tried the new Relentless twice. It didn't exactly do too much. I think the one time felt weird because the dice were really skewed, but that's a dice game for you right there. But in terms of the factions it hurt the most, it hurt Greyjoy a lot with Victarion. And I thought that was fine because he was unique. But then it hurt Night's Watch a ton. And I've had to adjust for sure, playing Night's Watch without that, and you aren't trying to get 9 activations anymore because you just can't, because you don't have those 3-point pseudo activations. But it also creates this environment of, now my 10-point unit dies, I still might have a chance to win the game because I have other units on the board that will let me still do stuff. Whereas before, as a Night's Watch player, if I lost my Ranger Hunters with a Watch Captain, I'm like, well, yeah, let's go play the next game. Sometimes, not all the time, but depending on the time in the game, that's kind of how it felt before. It inadvertently is hurting Night's Watch as well, which this is good for the game, in my opinion. I'm a Night's Watch player. I do Night's Watch. Just call me Jon Snow. I'm Night's Watch and Free Folk.
Okay, all right, that's okay though. Yeah.
But ultimately, you're losing that activation. But if you're not taking that Watch Captain now, you're losing Boldness and Courage as well. So that's kind of a double effect on the Night's Watch players. You didn't see too much of the Relentless in the Unsullied Unsullied
Swordmasters
officer. Unsullied officer. That's what it was. You didn't see it too much because I think that faction just kind of lends itself towards the cavalry style, and you didn't see too much infantry in competitive play. You mostly saw Drogo and dragons before the dragons were nerfed, and that's another one. That's a nice little buff that'll bring dragons back, I think. But yeah, Relentless, again, healthy for the game in my opinion. It's a buff to other factions who did not have Relentless, like Baratheons and Lannisters, and it's a big one in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sort of with Bob. I think it was a great change. In particular, it was good for Night's Watch and Targaryens too, because I don't want to use the term crutch, but I also don't want to not use the term crutch. It just felt like their list building was hinged so much on Relentless. It was almost like, you have to take Relentless. I have to take Relentless. I have to have it. I have to push these activations out. It's like 10 points of your army was accounted for instantly, at least 10 points. And
that's why I stopped playing them for a while and moving to Free Folk, because every list I had a Watch Captain in it competitively.
Right, and it created such tunnel vision. It narrowed your mind on what, like, even Ranger Trackers. I mean, they've been my favorite Night's Watch unit for so long, and they couldn't necessarily find their way into all of the competitive lists because they didn't work with that 10-point Relentless math. And in reality, Ranger Trackers are better than they were in 1.6. But now with this change to Relentless, of course, Ranger Trackers are back on the menu. I love playing them. It's given me the opportunity to experiment with the Watch Marshal, who I always thought was fantastic. I always thought he was great. And now he's making his way into lists, and there's just things that are working that, arguably they could have worked before, but kind of that stubborn meta trapping mentality, like you had to have it. And I think the change to Relentless was I think it's a good change. It's being received kind of one of two ways. Either people are saying this just isn't worth taking, or there are people who feel like it's just crazy overpowered. It's absolutely brutal. It doesn't belong in the game, things like this. I feel like it's a strong piece, right? If you put Relentless in Ranger Hunters or in Sworn Brothers or in Unsullied, that's a 9-point unit. It's a 9-point unit that's single activation. So it has to be strong. It has to do something. I feel like there are tons of counters that exist in the game now to take that unit and be able to, if not, be able to avoid it, make it kind of a 9-point paperweight. I think there's certainly tools where you can kill it as well, because it's 9 points and it's a single activation. And then you go into what's the supporting cast for this 9-point unit, and the likelihood is that the list is entirely built around that 9-point unit doing something, and it's relatively reasonable and fair and easy to get that unit to not do 9-point unit stuff. Like 9-point units have to do something, and I feel like they've given us tools in this game to make a 9-point unit not do something.
I'd agree with that, but my experience, other experience with Relentless is the unit just being ignored, which isn't a bad thing in itself sometimes. But it depends. Like if you have that 2-point attachment and it requires them attacking you, then sometimes they just like, I'm just not going to attack that unit till it's till everything else is dead first. So sometimes you don't even get value out of it. But losing the activation was the biggest thing, in my opinion, that is healthy for the game.
Well, and speaking about health of the game, we got some events coming up. Adepticon's just around the corner, and are either of you going to be in attendance there?
Yes. I actually have to room with Brett.
There we go. So are you going to be playing? I'm hoping maybe there'll be some stream coverage. What are you thinking about bringing if you're playing?
First off, I hear there's a pancake shortage in Chicago, so Brett won't get his pancakes in the morning. But I don't know if I can reveal this.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't care. I'm debating between Free Folk and Night's Watch, obviously, because those are the two I own. But probably it's been a while since I've ran Night's Watch in a super competitive tournament, so most likely doing the Night's Watch route.
Fantastic. Brett, how about you?
Oh, I don't think this comes as any surprise. My Night's Watch is my closest to being painted. I feverishly tried to get Martell's done. It just wasn't going to happen. For Night's Watch, there was minimal, updating and touching up to be done. They were pretty well all the way done. I'm excited to try some new Night's Watch stuff. Some Night's Watch with Bolton units mixed in. Some Vanguard cavalry. They got kind of a glow up. They look really nice. I love the models, so I've been painting my test model. I really like it. I'm excited to do the hunters and not the hunters, the Ranger Tracker, Ranger Vanguard, Ranger Danger. The Ranger Danger is very much a thing. And it's not just Ranger Hunters this time. I think the Ranger Danger cavalry list with Benjamin Stark is a real thing. It's just very exciting for me because I love trackers, and I bought Vanguard. It's like I think these guys are decent and maybe have a place, and now with just that little subtle bump to the 4+ defense, they're the anchor that I've always wanted in my cavalry unit without leaning into Bolton Flayedmen. I think they're perfect, and it's just so exciting. Aren't you excited for Ranger Danger, Bob?
Yeah, I actually removed the shrink wrap on my Ranger Vanguard as soon as the patch hit. So,
there we go. Hey.
So I'm like, I should have done an unboxing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, that unit, that's what I'm talking about with the patch bringing people back to the game as far as Night's Watch players, because you have this new unit now that you're willing to put on the table in competitive play. Now, I'm sure people played it in casual environment, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. If you're do what you want to do to have fun with the game, obviously. But in the competitive aspect, I didn't really touch them. I didn't really give them much of a chance because the 7-point unit that had 5 armor, it was tough. And the outflank, the outflank, we haven't even talked about the outflank change. That's incredible to me. I think it's awesome. It's already changed the way people have played the game, and the games that I've played, they just have to be more careful with their deployment and their movements in round 1 if you're waiting to bring on an outflank unit in round 2. It's definitely changed play style a lot, and that's good for the game overall game too. Maybe not the people playing against it, but they might not like it overall. It's a different style, and that's always nice to have different styles and options to put your little toys on the table, you know?
Absolutely. And so, I didn't want to throw it in the bus here, but will there be a stream at Adepticon? Can people check it out on Sunday Slaughter?
We hope so.
Okay.
From my understanding, we're not in the main hall for the song tournament, so we should be able. I think it's in a different building entirely, so it's different Wi-Fi. So hopefully we can get on the Wi-Fi. Otherwise, the direct line was very expensive. Not in the Sunday Slaughter budget.
Yet.
Yeah. So we're going to try and go off the Wi-Fi while we're there and stream the top table. Hopefully it works out.
Fantastic.
If not, it'll be recorded and uploaded to YouTube probably when we get home, because uploading those videos through hotel Wi-Fi probably won't work very well.
Makes sense. Well, thanks so much for stopping by to talk a little bit about the update, some of just like initial impressions. I'm looking forward to hear about how you guys do at Adepticon and what kind of, that'd be a great chance to see, how some of these changes shake out and what people are thinking about as far as list building going into that. So I'm really excited to hear how the results go. And I hope you guys keep kicking butt, taking names. You guys are both taking the black, and as for the usual, I wish you a lot of success in your future battles. We got to get out here and get you guys talking some more about some of your secrets that you are unlocking in this update as you guys get some more and more games in.
Hey, thanks for having us. It was fun.
Yeah, it's always good to catch up.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
All right, and in the meantime, I hope you get your miniatures on the table.